Good morning, good Vach. This week's quota 94, 6 through 9, second half of Tzadik Dalet, Sifim Vov, Zayin Ches test. Again, it's um, not a super complicated Sifim, and as you've already been seeing, the more we learn, it snowballs. So the more we understand and appreciate the principles, the more it is to keep on learning the Sifim because we're just applying the principles that we already know. There are going to be some new principles that are introduced, and I will explain them presently. So let's begin. So Sivov, I can give you the scenario, and you'll tell me what you think. So part of the vegetables, morning, yeah, part of the vegetables that was cooked along with meat. Okay, so it's not absorbent of flavor through pot because it was cooked in a fleishik pot. It was cooked with actual meat, so it's absorbent directly. All right. Now those vegetables are later now cooked in a part of a soup. Let's just say that part of a soup is in a milchik, a dairy pot, and that dairy pot was used within the last 24 hours. So you have two positive flavors absorbed in these vegetables. It was earlier cooked together with meat, absorbed directly. And now it's absorbing positive flavor of milk from the dairy pot. Now, it's not nice and tam, bar nice and tam. It's not bar not, because the absorbent meat is not second degree, it's first degree. The vegetables absorb directly from the meat. So you need to have 60 to nullify the flavor of meat, right? Because now what's happening is this whole entire stew is absorbing from the milk, positive flavor from the milk pot. Yes? So how much do you have to have 60 against? Against the vegetables or against the meat in the vegetables? What would you say?
The vegetables. The vegetables.
Why would you say total totality of the vegetables?
No.
Because
they became not kosher, maybe? No, but
play that out. So the only thing you're saying is Hanan. Because it's absorbent, it should take on the thing of that which is absorbent. But you made a very key point there. Did it itself become prohibited? At which point were the vegetables prohibited? Never. It's absorbent of meat. Meat is totally kosher. So what would render it Hanan? It's a trick question. Nothing. There's nothing there to render it Hanan. And therefore, now that you walk that through, do you need 60 against the vegetables or against the meat in the vegetables? Against the meat in the vegetables. That's it. That's above. You need 60 against the meat in the vegetable, not against the totality of the vegetables. Because Hanan is only when there's an absorbent of a prohibition. According to the Ramah, any prohibition. And according to the Machaber, when it's absorbent of milk and meat as a prohibition. Which you already learned. What simon was that? Terrible with the numbers. What simon was it? We learned Hanan. So like days, was it? So because there was no actual prohibited food within the vegetables, you only need 60 against the ratio of the meat within the vegetables. Now that's only possible if you actually know how much meat there was. So if these vegetables were sauteed and you later when you're taking it out, you notice there's a slice of salami in there, and then those vegetables were used for your greater part of a soup. That's one thing. So it's only a tiny strip of meat.
If they were in a meat sauce cooking.
If they're in a meat sauce cooking, you would not know how much is 60 in those vegetables. But if in theory, if you knew, it would only be against the tiny little amount of meat that little piece of meat that was happened to be in your sauteed vegetables. That's going to be sif vav. It's pretty straightforward. The point basically is Hanan, considering that Hanan is only when an item is absorbent of something that is prohibited. Therefore, if a part of is absorbent of meat, it doesn't render the entire vegetable as meat-y. It's only the meat in the vegetable that requires 60 against, not the vegetable itself. Okay, that's if vav. Siv Zion, this is where we are introduced to a new subject.
There's no reason why just the example of onions just
Okay, so the example of onions, good point. Why the Shulchan Aruch mentions the example of onions, because onions, as we're going to learn in a moment, or actually learn in subject, we'll learn next week, a little bit this week also, but we'll learn mostly next week that onions can be absorbent even without heat because it's sharp, and if there's a knife cutting it, it can be absorbent even without heat. So the point the Shulchan Aruch is making, no matter which way the vegetable absorbed, whether it's an onion that absorbed because it's a sharp item and was absorbent because it was a knife cutting it, or whether it's other vegetables that were absorbent through cooking, in any case,
onions or vegetables which are cooked.
correct. It's onions or vegetables to give either version of how the vegetables were absorbent of meat, whether because it's an onion and it's sharp and it's absorbent through cut.
Let's assume that we understood that, like,
Correct.
milk.
Yes. Well, it says onions or vegetables that have been absorbent of meat. I don't care how it was absorbent.
Right.
Is the point. Whether it's this or that. Yeah. Okay, good point. Now, so Siv Zion introduces a new subject, which is the subject of disakina, the pressure of the knife. Now, the pressure of the knife is going to be the subject of next week when we learn Tzaddik Vav and Tzaddik Zion, which Tzaddik Vav is specifically going to be the interaction of the knife and sharp items, your onions you just referred to. Onions are a funny item, as we're going to learn, because when you fry them, they become sweet. So they lose that sharpness later. So that's going to be Tzaddik Vav. But nonetheless, we are introduced to the subject now in Siv Zion. Now, here's what we should know about the nature of a knife, which is going to play into the halacha in Siv Zion, and then it's going to come up again in Tzaddik Vav, where we're going to explore this in more detail. But essentially, a knife has two components that make it unique than any other utensil. Firstly, like any other utensil, it absorbs. Right? Like any other utensil. Oh, good morning, Noah. Like any other utensil, a knife absorbs. And like any other utensil, it'll absorb through heat. Like any other utensil. Now, what's unique about the knife in terms of absorbent, and absorbent, by the way, is in both directions, both in exfoliation and in absorption. So both directions. Mavli umaflit. Right? Like any other utensil, it can both give flavor and absorb flavor, and do so at once if it's interacting with heat. What's unique about the knife is that the pressure of the knife can cause both absorption and exfoliation, not necessarily fully, but more than it would if it were just a spoon without heat. Or with heat more than others. So if a hot spoon into a hot item will not, let's say a cold spoon into a hot item will not give off and absorb as much as good morning, as a knife cutting a hot item.
Hot spoon and a hot knife.
If you were using a spoon or even a fork to pick up a hot steak, versus as the case is going to be in our in Siv Zion, if you're cutting a hot steak with a knife. So there's heat. There's heat. The pressure of the knife causes more absorption than the spoon.
What is that more absorption?
Does it go through the entire steak or just at the surface level? Just or kedei netila, depending. Okay. That's going to be Siv Zion. That's point one about a knife.
How is that different than stabbing it with a fork?
Okay, we're going to learn Tzaddik Vav about the uniqueness of knife and why it's different than, say, forks, other things. We're going to get to that. The pressure in a fork is not the same as a knife. So we're going to learn. That's why you use spoon. Spoon makes it easier. Okay, so that's number one, going to be in, that's one component of the knife, is that with the pressure, it causes more absorption than it would without that pressure. And in different scenarios, the more that the upgrade of absorption is dependent on the situation, either from, let's say, as nothing to a surface layer, or from a surface layer to full absorption. That's point one about knives. And point two about knives is that even if there isn't absorption, or if there's minimal absorption, klisheni, let's say, according to those who say klisheni doesn't cause full absorption, let's say, yeah, the knife, however, because of the pressure holds on to residue of that which it cut, and therefore will give off of its own residue from what it previously cut into the thing it's cutting now.
Mamash, right?
So it's not mamish mamoshes. It's not treated exactly like mamoshes. We're going to see that there's a machlekes about the nature of this mamoshes. Right, look at that in a moment. So it's not mamish like mamoshes, but it's still some residue. I mentioned this once before that if you had a slow drip of very, very thin slow drip of water on the surface of a knife and you let it roll down, you're going to see that the water splits
We call it grease.
like grease. You barely even see it. If you scratched it with like your finger, you might be able to feel it with your nail, a little bump maybe. But even if not, there's still some residue. Okay, so there's two components to the knife: absorption, like everything else, plus the added effect of the pressure causing more absorption and exfoliation, mavli and maflit. B, even if there isn't full absorption for whatever the reason is, there's still shamnunis. There's still the surface of the knife still retains residue and will give that to whatever it's cutting into. This also changes the way you're kosherizing the knife. If what you're dealing with here is a knife that fully absorbed like everything else through full-on heat, and the way to kosherize it would be also through full-on heat, hagala, boiling. If, however, what you're dealing with here is that the knife didn't fully absorb, it only has residue that's on the surface, then you have to get rid of the residue on the surface. And the way you do that is by stabbing, using the knife to stab the ground, very hard ground, 10 times.
Cutting something cold, you would have to do that
Oh,
with a syringe.
exactly. So cutting something cold, even though there may be no absorption, depending on the situation, but there's definitely going to be residue transfer one way or the other. So first of all, the thing you're cutting into would require to take off a peel, klipa, because there's some residue left on it. And secondly, you'd have to remove the residue that the knife took on from that thing you just cut by stabbing into the ground 10 times. That's going to come up in Sif Zion. Was that clear?
That's the halacha for something cold in most cases.
Say again?
That's the halacha for something cold.
Yeah, as we're going to learn, that's correct. So in light of all of this, we'll go through a few, okay, the details are going to come up as you learn the Sif, and especially as you do our Chazar L'Maaseh, but as you learn it on your own, you'll see all the details, but let's just go through some of them. The origin of the Sif comes from Rabbeinu Peretz, who builds on the Gemara that I just referred to. The Gemara, which refers to the fact that knife has the ability to cause extra blia, extra absorption and exfoliation because of the pressure. And the conclusion that the Rabbeinu Peretz comes to is as follows: that if you cut hot meat that is a clear rishon with a dairy knife that was used in the last 24 hours, it's a dairy knife ben yaimai. Because of that pressure and because the meat is hot, the flavor goes throughout the entirety.
The meat? Or we talking about the
of the meat.
Okay.
You'd have to have 60 to the ratio of, according to Rabbeinu Peretz, the amount of the knife that was used to cut.
Either is hot.
No, if then
Just the meat.
the meat is hot, even if the knife is cold.
What if the knife's hot and the meat's cold?
If the knife is hot and the meat is cold,
Do we say tatagava or no? Because the meat is technically.
so actually the point being made here is the Shah points this out. Even if the knife is below, so even if it's tatagavar, the heat of the meat combined with the pressure that the knife causes makes it go throughout the entirety. You have to have 60 in the meat against the ratio, 60 to the time, the amount of the knife that was put into the meat. So if it's a big knife, and you know for sure that only a certain part, you wouldn't have to have 60 to the ratio of the entire knife. Although others disagree, because you have this principle when it comes to metal, that if a little bit of metal becomes hot, everything becomes hot. We had this with respect to the ladle, the opinion which said that when you measure 60 to the ratio of your stew against the ladle, if it's metal, there was the opinion that said it has to be against the entirety of the ladle, not just the ladle that was inserted. And that's in machlekes would apply here with the knife. But be that as it may, you have to have 60 in the meat against the knife, even if tatal gavar, even if the cold is below, considering the heat combined with the pressure.
Are we more lenient if it's like a non-sharp knife? Is it like let's say a knife like is sharp versus a knife that isn't?
Funnily enough, that's a good question. I thought about it, and maybe when we get to the Chazar Lamaisa, maybe it'll come up. But when I was preparing this last night, I thought of that, and I actually thought the farkeret, the less sharp the knife is, the more pressure you have to put.
Okay.
But also
Funnily enough.
some of our butter knives, that we call butter knives, have little small serrated things. They're not like mamish, but they're like tiny little indentations.
Yeah, and therefore,
So
serrated knife makes a difference.
Being serrated is one of the issues.
It's possible. I don't know, and I'm gonna reserve comment until Tzadik Vav. The Tzadik Vav is really the din of Hilchot Sakina, and if there's ever a difference between serrated and non-serrated knife, I would assume it's going to come up there. So I'm going to hold off on commenting. From my memory, I don't remember there being a difference.
You said, I think.
Non-sharp knives, they actually end up meaning more pressure. Yeah, we'll see, I guess, as we explore this more. Okay. Now, if the knife is not ben yoimai, so the flavor that the milk knife gives off into the meat is a negative flavor, right? So considering what we just know, what would you have to do? So there's no real mixture of milk and meat in terms of flavor because the flavor of the milk is negative. But you have the other problem, which is the residue of milk that's there. And residue that's left behind, even if it's negative flavor, has to be removed. And that's why even if it's of a negative flavor, you still have to remove a surface layer
From the meat.
from the meat because of the residue, right? And
You better use another knife to relieve it.
well, obviously, use another knife. Yes, use another knife to take rid of that.
Take off the.
That's right.
Saying because the residue is obviously not negative flavor, it's actual flavor.
So that's right. So at least according to most, the residue is considered actual substance, not just flavor. Right? I alluded to that earlier. That there's this discussion whether or not the residue is considered actual flavor, considered flavor. Sorry, whether it's considered like actual mamushis or not.
Flavor.
Yeah. So if it's considering that it is at least to some degree considered mamushis, it's like a halfway between mamushis. It's halfway to full on pieces of milk. So you have to scrape off the edge of your meat to get rid of that. And now what happens to the knife? The knife has fresh meat absorption because of the pressure and it's hot. Now there's no basar b'challah. There's no actual milk and meat on the knife because the milk and meat interaction on the knife is negative as far as the milk is concerned. All right? But you still have mamoshes. You have shamnunis at least. You have some residue of both milk and meat. The milk being negative and the meat being positive. So we already learned we learned last week. When you have one positive and one negative, said the Ramah, you should not use it for either milk or meat, but you could use it for parav. But if you want to use it for milk and meat, you'd have to go through Hagala. Go through kosherizing. And the Shach says the same thing is true of the knife over here. That because there's no actual milk and meat Isser, considering that the milk is negative, so putting into parav wouldn't cause any problem, but putting into milk or meat is problematic because now you're introducing milk and meat into a mixture where you're not supposed to, because you're not supposed to mix milk and meat even when it's negative.
Then I'd have to stab it on.
Hagala, says the Shach, because the meat is hot. So you have to have hagala, you have to have boiling.
It didn't come in through cutting.
It didn't come only through cutting, it came through cutting and heat. Because the meat was hot, so you have to have hagala to have.
Did you have to do both or just hagala?
As far as I know, it's only hagala, right? Because hagala, like when you're kashering for Pesach, we don't do meats and bakarka, we don't stab in the ground and boil in lives, because boiling will cook everything out, including that which is on the surface. If it's going to get the flavor out from the inside, it's definitely going to get rid of the surface too.
So why can't we? I'm saying, so if it just cut it, why can't we do hagala instead of stabbing?
What?
I'm saying, let's say the treifa came in through cutting. Why do we stab them to the ground instead of just doing hagala?
You could do hagala if you want to.
Hagala. Okay.
Stabbing to the ground is meant to be easier.
Okay.
Just go outside.
Supposedly.
It is easier. It's not so hard. It takes you a couple seconds. It's not very difficult to do.
Not in Montreal.
And then Montreal.
It will completely ruin your knife, though.
Sorry?
It will completely ruin your knife, though.
What But the truth, I mean, it'll destroy your knife. But I guess you have to resharpen it and you're done.
I was wondering if you
I don't think
something
personally I've
else
ever done
besides-
Duchkas Sakina. On a personal level, I don't think I've ever done it. Hagol I've done multiple times. I don't think I've ever done Duchkas Sakina. I'm sorry, Nitsa Karka. I've never done stab personally. I've never done stabbing in the ground.
Like, I was wondering if you could use something else, like a potato. It's very thick, you know, I don't know.
You
if
have to
it would
stab
work
10
the
different
same
potatoes.
way, Or
I don't know.
something else,
Something else that's equivalent to hard ground.
Yeah,
I don't know.
Okay.
Okay, now the Ramah, funnily enough, says a din, and I want you to tell me where the curiosity about this din is. Because the Ramah is going to say that if your meat is in a klisheni, then it doesn't do full absorption because it's not hot anymore, it's klisheni. And therefore, all you need to do is take off a surface layer and stab in the ground because there's no absorption considering it's a klisheni. What's your objection? What's the klisheni here? What's in a klisheni right now?
Oh, solids.
Solid. It's a steak.
Yeah,
Didn't we say that it doesn't
yeah.
that the solid doesn't degrade status because it happens to go from point one to point B? And indeed, the Shach is going to quote the Marshal, which says that even if it's a steak, even if it's on a plate, even if it's klisheni, it would still be full absorption considering that it's a davar gush, it's a solid.
Right.
Very good.
Yeah. So this one will only apply if it was like a soup or a stew or whatever.
Correct. But then the knife doesn't have the same pressure.
Oh, because it's liquid.
It's liquid. Right. Okay. But if it's and Tastaka says that if it's just a spoon in a klisheni, then we could be lenient. It's a spoon, which means there's no pressure of the knife. It's klisheni, so it lost its original status. So, all right. That's as far as Siv Zion goes. Siv. Okay. Siv Ches is also a law that's would seem a little bit curious, and you'll see why it's curious. I'll just tell you the law, and then you'll tell me why it's curious. And without the background, I mentioned this once, that the Shulchan Aruch, we collectively, not just us, but we, people at large, like many of these halachic works, we don't learn the work as it's intended to be learned. You know, thanks to the Rebbe's Takana of Rambam, we learn Rambam as it was intended. Rambam's instruction of how Rambam should be learned was read Chumash and then read my book. You know, even though until Takana of Rambam was almost exclusively learned as like these deep pulpullim in 5 lines of Rambam. That was not his intention whatsoever. His intention was to read it simply and clearly from beginning to end, as Rebbe's instruction is following the Rambam's Iktama, following the Rambam's introduction. The same thing is true of the Shulchan Aruch. The Shulchan Aruch is written, not meant to be learned as a standalone work. It was meant to be, I mentioned this before, after you, Mr. Great Scholar, learned through the entire Beis Yosef, which the Beis Yosef is the Rabbi Yosef Karo, the same author of the Shulchan Aruch. It's his commentary to the Torah, in which he gives all the background of all the Gemara and all the preceding opinions before him, with his own analysis of those opinions. So, you know, which goes on for pages and pages and pages. After you learned all that, I can't expect you to memorize all that. So here's going to be a little handout where you're going to have Cole's notes of just the conclusions that we came to in our lengthy Beis Yosef. And when you read them, it'll remind you. And therefore said the Beis Yosef, in his introduction to the Shulchan Aruch, every 30 days you should finish the entire Shulchan Aruch. None of us do. None of us. I don't mean just us around this table. I mean us.
Kol Yisrael.
Basically, all of you people who learn Shulchan Aruch does that. Because we're learning Shach and Taz and commentary. When in reality, it's just supposed to learn the Beis Yosef in depth. Like I spend 10 years doing that or whatever it takes. And then from there forward, every 30 days, you review the entire Shulchan Aruch. Again, with no commentaries on the side. You're just reading the Shulchan Aruch because it reminds you of all the conclusions. All right.
It means hundreds of simanim.
Sorry? Yeah.
In 30 days, hundreds of simanim.
Yeah. So much so, I mentioned this, that one of the earliest printings of the Shulchan Aruch is a pocket-sized Shulchan Aruch for a traveler who doesn't want to miss his 30-day cycle of learning. A pamphlet, one of the earliest books of the Shulchan Aruch. Remember, imagine the Shulchan Aruch with no commentary on the side.
Yeah, it could be done to read it through.
It's just reading through. But you've already toiled for years over the Beis Yosef. Right? And this is the Ramah's like, this is where the Ramah comes here. Because the Ramah is like, you did this whole analysis of all the Rishonim, of all the preceding commentaries, completely ignoring ours in Ashkenaz. Or quoting them and saying, disregarding them. So I'm going to stick in my Ashkenaz ones. And just since we're on this, but
And
some,
only in the review.
that's right.
Rama is only adding it in the review.
Yes, so much so that sometimes the Rama will actually insert in the review something that the Beis Yosef himself put, but not in the something the Beis Yosef himself wrote, but not in the Shulchan Aruch. Because the Rama will be like, one second, you got to remember this also, even though it's in the Beis Yosef. So a lot of times the Rama's gloss is not an argument on the Beis Yosef. He actually adding things the Beis Yosef himself said in the Beis Yosef, just not in the Shulchan Aruch for whatever reason. Actually, Vav is going to be just that. In Vav, the Rama is just going to give the going to concur with the Shulchan Aruch, just add a little detail. Anyway, I'm saying this because reading Sif Ches alone would be very curious. And I'll just tell it to you as it is, but with the background of the Beis Yosef, it's not. Again, there's going to be two ways, as we're going to see in the commentary, two different ways to understand what the case of the Shulchan Aruch is, because it's not exactly clear. But let's just give one of the versions, which seems to be the more straightforward version. A piece of cheese falls on top of a meat dish. Okay, so it's moisture. The cheese has moisture. Okay, and it falls onto a hot meat dish.
Food, not a utensil.
No, food.
When you say dish, yeah.
I mean, on the food. Yeah. What do you say that halacha is?
Strafe.
I talk about bar.
So the hottest bottom takes on the absorbs flavor. Yeah, it's strafe. It's
Says oh no, all you have to do is just remove the top layer of the meat dish, the meat stew, of the meat pan. It's something called panadish, which is like a mixture of like meat and let's say it's a meat pie of some sort. It's a mixture of meat and a doughy substance of some sort. Right? All you have to do is remove the surface layer. Why would you say such a thing? And he says the same thing other way around. It's another case. Cheese falls into a hot meat plate. Tatagavar, hot meat plate. What would you say?
It's gonna melt the cheese and it's gonna absorb the cheese.
That's it. No, only surface layer. Why?
There for the cheese.
For the cheese. Why? So without back into the Beis Yosef, it doesn't really follow. Because Beis Yosef basically makes the argument that cheese is, even if it's wet, is a non-fatty thing. Less fatty than any other food. Because of I suppose because of cheese's on a salty nature, it's like its nature is to pull its flavor inward, for lack of a better word. Like cheese's nature is to pull its flavor inward, so it doesn't have the same exfoliation as other things, and therefore it's going to be even less exfoliated, whatever that is, than other foods. Now, the Ramah does not comment here, which is a major curiosity, because the Ramah was of the view that we didn't know the difference between fatty and non-fatty, and he treats everything as if it's absorbing all the way. So why isn't there more commenting here? This is a discussion amongst the commentaries on the side, but nonetheless, it would seem. Where's my? It would seem. Where am I reading from here? Should have underlined it like I usually do. Because there's two ways to understand the case of the Shulchan Aruch. One way is I just told you the case of the Shulchan Aruch is the cheese falls onto the actual meat food. The other version of understanding the Shulchan Aruch is that it falls onto the keli of the meat food.
Yeah.
So it's a little one step removed, which kind of helps understand the Shulchan Aruch. Nonetheless, the curiosity of the Tatal Gavar, which should be more than just a surface layer. But who was it? Yeah. So first and foremost, because of the disagreement, there are those that say even if you follow the law of the Shulchan Aruch. Oh, here you go. So there are those who disagree with the Shulchan Aruch and saying that even if you follow the Shulchan Aruch's law, that we do know the difference between fatty and liquid, there at least should be, at the minimum, not just a surface layer, but actually kedei netila, which is fatter, like the half thumb. Moreover, considering the Ramah in Kofei would say we don't know the difference between fatty and solid, the whole thing, would be prohibited. So the whole meat dish would be prohibited. Yeah,
Remember, they have
the
done-
prima godim is like we never heard of anybody who ever such a thing.
Mhm.
It's totally treif. And the big question is why the Rama is silent here.
I mean, the only thing that's
Especially since we learned kofei before tzaddik, but in the order of the Shulchan Aruch, kofei comes after tzaddik. So like, it's a big curiosity why the Rama doesn't say anything here. That's sifches.
But a meat pie, you could have crust on top, and you could just remove that layer of crust, and it wouldn't ever.
Okay, so that's why meat pie is not.
It's not
You're right about
great.
meat pie is not a good example because
Yeah.
you are right that
There's layers.
there could be layers and it could be a nice. It could be it could be like a not bar not
Yeah,
situation.
You just
Right.
cut off the top, and there's no interaction between
The
that
question-
cheese and the thing
Doesn't
below.
We mentioned that once before. Sorry.
Doesn't really explain. It says a cooked meat dish.
It's just a dish. The way, yeah, it's Panadish. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing it correctly. I'm not even sure which language it is. I'm just going to imagine that it's in some form of Arabic because the Beis Yosef is speaking and he lived in Arabic countries,
Right.
meaning in Eretz Yisrael Tzvas, but before that in Arabic countries. So I don't know. How does he translate Panadish here? Tavshel Psari could go Isa in Tarovis Basa. Dough mixed with meat. So not a meat pie, maybe more like a meat lasagna or something.
Okay.
Because you're right, a meat pie would have a different din
Yeah.
because of the crust.
Because technically that's separate.
That would separate,
layer.
correct.
There's air in between.
It becomes a nut bar nut.
Yeah.
Right? The cheese into the dough and the
Dough
dough into the meat, in which
What is
case
that?
no. So we learned, what did we learn? We learned that only a surface layer there. It's less, right?
Even like we said, an egg, which is completely shelled. It goes
Oh, because
through.
eggs
Oh,
we
porous.
determined has porous, has holes.
What goes inside
It's
the-
completely, we learned this once before, right?
like a pie crust is really through, yeah.
According to many, you'd only need to remove the pie part, and then maybe a little bit of the meat because it's second degree, right? Okay, so that's it. Yes. So finally, siftes is
There's no conclusion for us. It's just that's it. That's
there's the
just it.
Shulchan Aruch din that you're going to learn, and you're going to learn the commentaries all over the side that say we disagree.
Okay.
And pretty much, right? What is it? What it shows on the side there? Does it bring Prima Godim on the side there in siftes?
No, we don't have to premegad
No.
on this, but wait,
Yeah.
the shock seemed to. I didn't know the premegad.
But no, the Shach explains the
Yeah.
the Shulchan Aruch,
Yeah.
explaining it a different way. He says that it falls onto the. He says, what does the Shach say?
Oh, just the shock says it just needs to be removed. The place where it
This
touches
is
needs to be
talking
removed.
of even when the cheese fell onto the meat food itself.
Itself.
Yeah.
And
That's
with
his
regard-
version of it.
And with regard to soft cheese, the place where it touched must be removed.
Kedei Netila.
Actually, he says in
Right.
He says there's no rota.
And Taz said-
Because he says he's explaining to Beis Yosef that the Beis Yosef is of the opinion that cheese is completely dry. It's always a dry thing. The Aruch HaShulchan is the one that gives the language
They're
that
all saying-
cheese absorbs for inward. Because they're trying to substantiate the Shulchan Aruch. The Prima Godim is the one who says,
Yeah, so all these opinions basically say it should be dry cheese.
maybe in the summary it'll include the Prima Godim.
No,
It should.
we didn't get we didn't get maybe yeah,
In the summaries, it should include you have the summary there?
Yeah.
Okay, in Sif Test. There's a Sif Test, other way. What does it show?
Probably right. Siftesh is.
Yeah, the Shach, Taz, what's in Taz? Here, right here.
Times 17 quotes
Quotes.
the opinion of the Mordechai that honey gives a bad taste.
Oh, that's Sif Test. Sorry, Sif Test.
Test.
I'm sorry, Sif Test.
Okay. Doesn't have anything like that.
No, let's see.
Okay.
Here, yeah. The cheese forbids the plate, as explained above. According to the Machaber, the surface layer, and according to the Ramah, which is how we rule in its entirety. Even though the Ramah is not quoted here, because the Ramah in Klofei says that. But according to the Ramah, who holds we do not know how to properly differentiate between foods which is considered lean or fatty, the halacha will be that everything becomes forbidden because the lower overpowers, and the lower in this case is boiling hot.
Still surprised he doesn't repeat his opinion here.
Not just repeats, he doesn't introduce it.
Yeah.
He leaves you hanging until 10 simanim later. It's a major curiosity that the Ramah is silent here. But nonetheless, that would be the halacha. Yeah.
It's nowadays.
Even though,
There's no reason.
see, the
to-
chiddush of
There's no.
the chiddush of the shach is that kadei klipa here is more than kadei klipa. It's kadei netila, whatever. Anyway, you'll read it's a little bit of a confusing
But in,
thing.
in today's time, though,
But the end remains that it's usher.
there's no reason
way
to
we
be
follow
lenient,
Ramah.
though. Like,
Sorry?
I'm saying, like, in today's time, there's no real reason to be lenient. Like, you're not losing. You're not like there's no thought. There's, like,
As you mentioned this many times, we are much more stringent than
no,
we
I
need
know
to be
but I'm
because
trying
we
to
can
say-
be.
I'm trying to say is that like
Correct.
there's no reason to make a leniency when it's not written.
Right. So in the cases where like people are throwing out dishes because they didn't know that the sink is not a problem, as they've been learning last 3 weeks, that's like a situation where I would, tell someone, okay, don't throw it out.
Right.
But if someone called me and said, a slice of cheese fell onto my meat lasagna, unless I know that the person is really in dire financial straits, and this means that they're not gonna be able to afford dinner tonight.
You tell them just throw the thing out.
Yeah. If the person's mamish in dire straits, because even according to the Rambam, we can't paskin that it's mutter.
Right.
But maybe I'm trying to think of a scenario of a person who's in such dire financial. It should even in that situation, I would tell him to throw it out and I'm coming over with dinner.
Yeah.
No, seriously,
Yeah.
because you're right. It's to find leniency is mamish no reason to, especially in these kinds of situations.
Yeah.
Where as you're learning, even though the Rambam is silent here, and Kufay is not.
Because you could make a leniency because it's silent here, but there's no point because there's no reason to.
As the Pri Megadim points out, Pri Megadim says, "This is lashon. Like Shamanu v'larinu, we've never heard, we've never seen anyone to be lenient in such a situation."
Yeah, pretty clear.
Yeah, the
That
Chazon
makes
Ish also is like, where is this thing that cheese is any different than anything else?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Anyway.
There's just no reason.
So because of these curiosities, there are those that learn that the Shulchan Aruch is not talking about where the cheese fell directly onto the meat, but it fell onto the plate upon which the meat was cooked. Because if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, it says, "Im nafal tanur,
Oh.
latanur pnadish gvina." If gvina fell into the oven of pnadish, maybe the pnadish is not there; it's just on the oven, and that's the chiddush here. Even though according to the Mechaber, cheese is dry and tata gavar, but because it's dry, it doesn't go all the way through. It's only a surface layer. Okay, right? But according to the Shach, which interprets it literally fell on top of the pnadish, on top of this meat thing, it's very curious.
Yeah.
Okay, Siftes gives us a special halacha with regard to honey, and this is another case in which residue, the question of whether residue is considered substance or not, plays in. Now, the Shulchan Aruch rules like the okay, let's first see the halacha. The halacha is that the Gemara tells us that if honey was cooked in a meat frying pan, it was boiled or fried in a frying pan, and then it was poured on to a hot dairy plate. Right? So the Gemara says that it was kosher. Right?
Okay.
So what's the reason for that?
Not for now. Right?
So not by not is one element, but we have to remember. Okay, let's get. Okay, so the question is first before we get to the honey can later be eaten with either, because it only is whichever one it's going to be eaten with. It's not barnat.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Now, the
honey doesn't.
Sorry?
Honey doesn't.
That is what the Shulchan. That's how the Beis Yosef explains this halacha. That it's not barnat.
Yeah.
So because it's not barnat, it's totally fine no matter what. However, the Taz is going to introduce a Mordechai who tells us the reason is because the honey renders the residue from the meat as negative flavor.
But why would you need that if you have not? I'm just saying, why would that be the reason that he doesn't hold?
I don't know.
Or not? You know what I'm saying? Like,
Why doesn't he mention not barnat? I don't know.
We might be more stringent, right? Actually, it's a really possible chalav. We might.
Oh.
We're actually
It's not just that because it came through cooking.
Yeah.
It came through cooking, and there are those that say when it comes to cooking, it's not barnat.
Yeah.
Especially since there's a shamnunis, right? If you're following that reasoning, right, then if you follow that reasoning that honey renders shamnunis as negative flavor, then that would mean that this halacha applies even if the pan wasn't perfectly clean. As long as you can't see any actual red pieces of meat, so it's not mamash mamoshes, but it's still residue. Because the residue is negative, it's not going to cause any going forward. But according to the Beis Yosef, where the leniency here is because of not barnat, then it's only if the pan was completely clean. That's what Taz is going to tell us.
So who is it? He's adding like a kula then?
Who?
This opinion that said that.
So it seems like he's adding a kula by saying So on the one hand, it's a kula because even if we don't treat it as not barnat, it's a negative flavor. It ruins the flavor. So even though it's not perfect, not barnat, because it's being cooked, it's still fine because it's negative flavor. But negative flavor is only applicable if negative flavor. Oh yeah, it's a leniency. It's applicable even if it's more than 100% perfectly clean, so long as you can identify any meat. It's just the residue, which is not
It
identifiable.
wouldn't say not by not if there was mamashos of something.
No,
And
you can't.
he's saying even if there's mamashos.
Correct. Even if, but not mamashos, you can see. You can see it's be'en. That's why it's an in-between stage. It's like it's residue.
Only residue.
Sorry, if it was a piece of meat stuck to the pan, and now you could see it in the honey, then not wouldn't. Sorry, the gum wouldn't be relevant, right? But
And not barnat wouldn't work either.
The nature of the
Right.
honey, right?
it's in the nature of the honey. That's not.
Nature of
Oh, so
If we took any other liquid, we would be saying
tazoi.
any of this.
Exactly, which means that's another thing. According to the Machaber, which is saying it's because of not barnat, it could be anything besides for honey anyway.
Mhm.
If the word is that that we don't treat apanat here because it's being cooked, but it's negative flavor, that's only true when honey interacts with meat.
So what's the Shulchan Aruch adding?
Sorry,
So what's the Shulchan
the
Aruch?
reason why it comes up
Point
here
test, yeah.
is because the what's the point test is to tell you that that the keli in which it's cooked doesn't have the effect of a knife.
Oh, you're saying that's what the point of this,
Basically.
I don't get that.
The knife effect, where it's hot substance plus knife, causes absorption all the way through. Without knife pressure, just dish, it doesn't go all the way through. To the point that it would ruin the next thing.
Mhm.
That's what it seems like it's coming up here. Otherwise, the question, right? How does he introduce it here? He introduces it, yeah. Yeah.
I just don't see anything new being learned.
Even though what? Yeah,
I just don't see anything new. That's like
if you're learning that, like the Taz, that it's because honey ruins the flavor of meat, that's a new halacha.
Yeah, so that's what.
That honey
okay, so
ruins the halacha.
that's what the test is about.
Right.
Honey ruins the flavor of meat.
But I'm not going to Beis Yosef.
Okay.
That's not barnat, right? So that's a funny thing. Yeah. Now the
So
final.
So why does he say honey? Why is he using honey as an example?
Is that was the case of the Gemara?
No,
That was the case of the Gemara. He's quoting the case of the Gemara, as is often the case, where the Shulchan Aruch, the Rambam will just quote the way the Gemara quoted it.
I see.
Yeah. Now, final din, which is not directly in the Shulchan Aruch, and again, a curiosity why the Ramah is silent. What's the halacha of the plate? It's a dairy plate that was used in the last 24 hours, and I'm pouring hot honey from a hot meat dish that was used in the last 24 hours. What's the din of the plate?
They're both used within the last 24 hours.
Yeah. And there's presumably in honey, there's an unbroken stream. So what did I say about the plate? It's absorbing from direct contact to klirishain of meat going into itself, which is dairy. Yeah. Which would mean, according to this.
The Rambam doesn't make a comment.
Sorry?
He doesn't make a comment on this. He
Doesn't comment, which is curious, right?
So he seems to be agreeing.
Sorry?
At least over here, he seems to be not.
But presumably the Rambam would say that it's that it's problematic. Right?
Shach is saying over
Now the
here-
Shach over says the reason why the Rambam is silent is because we have two stringencies equal leniency. Number one, according to many people, honey
It gives a bad taste.
gives a bad taste. Number two, according to many people, something cooked in a dish is still not barnat. So combined, that's what the Shach is saying. The reason why the Rambam is silent is because there's two leniency here,
Yeah.
two stringencies causing a leniency. In order to be stringent here, we have to A, consider it, we have to A, say it's not barnat, which according to some opinions it is, and B, we have to say that the honey makes a positive, doesn't ruin the flavor of meat, which according to some people does ruin the flavor of meat. Combining two stringencies, Rambam silent leniency, that the dish is okay. That's the way the Shach explains it. But without that Shach, you would have to borrow the Rambam from elsewhere and say that the meat, that the dairy is a problem, that the plate is a problem, considering the unbroken stream coming from a hot meat dish into a
Oh, because the honey is direct.
correct, direct. You're pouring directly from the hot from a hot pan directly onto the dish, both of which are banyoimoids. So it's positive flavor in both.
Right,
So it's either a cleavation, which according to the Ramah is
Yeah.
considered full absorbent.
for sure.
So why is he silent here? Unless we're saying two things. In order to be stringent and say that the honey ruins the dish, you have to A, say the honey doesn't ruin the flavor of the meat, which some say it does.
Mhm.
B, you have to say that something cooked inside a dish is not considered not barnat, which again, some people would say it is not barnat. Two stringencies equal a leniency, and we're going to allow the plate to get away with it.
Wow,
That's the way the Shach explains that Ramah's silence, even though the Ramah's silence in what was it, Zion is unresolved, or Ches, I'm sorry, is unresolved.
but like I said today, if we were in this situation today, we would, I feel like we'd be stringent and we'd pour from meat pan directly.
No, in the honey situation,
Well, how often is it? I mean, I think
how often are you cooking honey?
No,
If
yeah,
you're,
it's practical. If you have like, let's say you have,
if you're on the, if you're making, let's say,
if you're in the
honey candy,
okay, if you're in the business of it,
making
okay.
honey candy with
Okay.
fruits, you know,
Yeah, you can spend-
Pesach, we do that, yeah. Okay, let's look it up in our learning.
Meat,
Sorry,
you're in the business of honey candy and, what's it called?
you also fry sausages, so you have a meat pan.
No.
Okay, okay, David.